My name is Stella Leland. I was 17 years old when my father decided my future was a threat to his control. No daughter of mine needs a college degree, he barked, his face twisting into that familiar mask of cold authority. Then, with a single, violent motion, he ripped my Penn State acceptance letter in half, right there at the dinner table, over the roast chicken I had spent 2 hours cooking for him. That letter represented 9 months of secret applications, late-night essays, and a scholarship that was my only ticket out of this house. He turned my dreams into confetti on a dinner plate and smiled, thinking he had won. He was wrong. He didn't know that within 30 seconds, my grandmother would reveal a secret that would dismantle 20 years of his lies. Before I tell you how his kingdom crumbled, please like and subscribe to support stories of justice, and I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening to this story from? Drop your location and local time in the comments below. The house on Maple Street was a masterclass in deception. To the neighbors, it was a picture-perfect two-story brick home with white shutters and a lawn that my father, Arthur, mowed every Saturday at exactly 7:15 a.m. He didn't do it because he loved gardening. He did it because he craved the image of being a respectable man. But inside those four walls, the atmosphere didn't feel like a home. It felt like a curated museum where Arthur was the only curator, and I was just another piece of furniture he expected to keep polished. Every square inch of that house operated on his terms. The thermostat was a battleground. He kept it at a shivering 64 degrees all winter, claiming anything higher was wasteful, while he sat in his heavy leather recliner, the only person allowed to hold the remote. Dinner was served at 6 p.m. sharp. Not 6:01, not 5:59. If the salt shaker wasn't positioned exactly to the right of his plate, the silence that followed was louder than any scream. That oak dining table, with its heavy carved legs and a faint water stain in the corner where I always sat, had witnessed my entire childhood fading into a blur of chores and compliance. By the age of 10, while other girls were playing with dolls, Arthur handed me a spatula. "Your mother could do this in her sleep," he told me, his voice flat and devoid of warmth. "Figure it out." So, I figured it out. I mastered the roast chicken, the mashed potatoes, and the green beans, the only rotation he deemed acceptable. I became the housekeeper, the laundress, and the surrogate mother to my little brother, Leo. I packed Leo's lunch every morning, walked him to the bus stop, and scrubbed the bathroom tiles on my knees until my hands were raw. Arthur didn't see a daughter. He saw a utility. The ghost of my mother, Margot, haunted every corner. She was the only person who ever made the house feel warm, but after she passed away when I was 8, Arthur didn't just mourn, he erased. He packed every photo of her into cardboard boxes and shoved them into the dark corners of the garage. He forbade us from mentioning her name at the dinner table. Once, when I was 12, I made the mistake of telling him I wanted to be a nurse, just like she had dreamed of being. He didn't even look up from his paper. "Your mother had dreams too, Stella," he said with a chilling indifference. "Look where that got her." In his mind, her death wasn't a tragedy. It was an inconvenience she had caused him. I later found out from my Aunt Vivian that Arthur had actually forced my mother to drop out of nursing school. He didn't want a partner, he wanted an anchor. He wanted someone whose world was small enough to fit inside his palm. My daily routine was a cage, simple and cold. 5:30 a.m. alarm, 5:45 a.m. coffee started. Black, exactly 1 sugar. If I forgot that single cube of sugar, he wouldn't yell. He would just push the mug to the center of the table and stare at me until I fixed it. That silence was his greatest weapon. It taught me that my only value lay in my obedience. I was 17 with the weight of a 40-year-old's responsibilities, living under the thumb of a man who called it his house and his rules every single morning. I thought I was trapped forever. I didn't realize that the very man who claimed to own every nail in those walls was actually living on a foundation of sand. That September, a quiet rebellion began in a place Arthur could never reach. Room 202, the office of my school counselor, Mrs. Gable. She was a sharp woman with silver-rimmed glasses and a gaze that could see right through a teenager's "I'm fine." She had noticed the way I hurried home the second the bell rang, the way I flinched at loud noises in the hallway, and the way I never joined any clubs despite my straight-A report card. One afternoon, she locked her door, sat me down, and asked the one question that changed my life. "Stella, what do you want to do?" I didn't have an answer. In Arthur's house, wanting was a sin. But with Mrs. Gable's help, I started to dream in secret. It felt like a crime. We worked on applications during my lunch breaks. She provided the SAT prep books, and she waived my fees. We used the school's address for every piece of correspondence because I knew the way Arthur checked the mailbox, like a warden inspecting a prison cell. He looked for any crack in the walls he'd built around me, but he never thought to look at the school. I wasn't entirely alone, though. I had Grandma B. She was my mother's mother, a woman who moved with a quiet dignity that Arthur's aggression could never touch. During one of my rare, monitored visits to her small apartment, I whispered the truth. She didn't flinch. She just squeezed my hand and said, "Use my address as your backup, Stella. I'll be your eyes and ears. Just trust me." The letter arrived at Grandma B's on a rainy Tuesday in April. Penn State. Accepted. A partial scholarship of $12,000 a year. When she called me from the payphone near the grocery store to tell me, I didn't cheer. I didn't scream. I just stood in the school hallway and let silent, hot tears track down my face. For the first time in my life, the cage door was unlatched. I just had to find the courage to walk through it. But Arthur was always 10 steps ahead in his cruelty. What I didn't know, what made my blood run cold when I found out later, was that he had already been building a new wall. He had gone to a local diner on Route 9, spoke to the owner, and arranged a full-time waitressing job for me starting the Monday after my graduation. He had even forged my signature on the tax forms. He wasn't just preventing me from going to college, he was ensuring I never left the zip code. He wanted me to be exactly what my mother was, a bird with clipped wings, singing only for him. The Sunday dinner, where everything changed, started like any other. The smell of rosemary chicken filled the kitchen, a scent that should have meant home, but felt like entrapment. I set the table with a precision that would make a surgeon proud. Arthur sat at the head, his kingdom restored, whistling a tune, because he thought his plan for the diner was moving perfectly. My heart was thumping against my ribs so hard, I thought he could see it through my shirt. Grandma B arrived in her camel-colored coat, looking like she was dressed for a battle she already knew she'd win. She tucked her heavy leather handbag under her chair, and she gave me a look that said, "Now." I reached into my pocket. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. "Dad," I said, "I got accepted to Penn State. I have a scholarship." I placed the envelope on the table. Arthur stopped whistling. The air in the room vanished. He looked at the letter not with pride, but with a cold, disgusted curiosity, the way you look at a bug you're about to crush. He picked it up, read it slowly, and then, with a terrifying calmness, he tore it into 4 pieces and dropped them into the gravy on his plate. "No daughter of mine needs an education," he whispered. "You're staying right here." The sound of my dreams being torn apart was a sharp, clinical snap that echoed off the kitchen walls. Arthur didn't even look at me as the confetti of my hard work soaked into his dinner. He just picked up his fork and went back to eating, confident that the matter was settled. "I've already handled it," he said between bites. "You start at the diner next week. This conversation is over." He turned to Grandma B, his voice dripping with venom. "And you? This is your doing, isn't it? Filling her head with the same nonsense you fed my wife? You coddled Margot, and look where that got her." The table went dead silent. Uncle Douglas stared at his plate, paralyzed. My brother Leo's eyes were wide with terror. I felt that familiar, heavy weight in my chest, the urge to disappear. I began to stand up, my muscle memory taking over, ready to clear the table and hide in the kitchen like I always did. But then, a voice stopped me. "Sit down, Stella." It was Grandma B. Her voice wasn't loud, but it had the resonance of a tolling bell. Arthur's head snapped toward her. "Ma, stay out of this. This is my house, my daughter, and my rules." He leaned forward, his face turning a dark, pressurized red. In fact, I tried to withdraw your application myself, Stella. Those people at the college said they needed a signature. So you're going to sign that withdrawal form tonight, right here, in front of everyone. I'm going to make sure you don't ruin this family with your selfishness. Grandma B didn't blink. She sat perfectly still for 30 seconds. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock on the wall. Then, she reached down, unbuttoned her coat, and pulled a stack of stapled papers from her handbag. She slid them across the table, right over the torn pieces of my letter. "Read it, Arthur," she said. Arthur scoffed, glancing at the document. "What is this, more school brochures?" "It's a deed," Bea replied, her voice as cold as a winter morning. "A property deed, notarized and filed with the county in 2002. Look at the name at the top. It doesn't say Arthur Leland. It says Beatrice M. Leland, sole owner." The color drained from my father's face. It didn't happen all at once. It was a slow-motion collapse, like a skyscraper losing its foundation. "I bought this house with my husband's life insurance and my own savings," she continued. "I let you live here rent-free because you were grieving and had 2 small children. But I never signed this house over to you. Not a single nail, Arthur, not a single brick." Arthur forced a hollow, desperate laugh. "So what? You're going to kick out your own son, after everything I've done for this place?" "I'm giving you a choice," Grandma B said, standing up. She looked like a queen reclaiming her throne. "Stella goes to Penn State this fall. You support her, you stay out of her way, and you keep living here. Or you fight me, and I call my attorney, Robert Vance, tonight to begin the eviction. I've already had the papers drafted." Arthur's kingdom of lies was burning down around him. He looked at the deed, then at Uncle Douglas, who refused to meet his eyes. Finally, he looked at me, his gaze low and predatory. "Tell her to stop this, Stella. You know this is your home. You're going to destroy this family over a school?" He wanted me to choose. He wanted me to be the villain. I looked at the man who had spent 9 years making me feel small, and for the first time I didn't drop my gaze. "I've been sitting down for 9 years, Dad," I said, my voice finally finding its strength. "I'm done. Pack a bag, Leo. We're going with Grandma." I walked upstairs, past the man who thought he owned the world, and I didn't look back. The lock on the cage hadn't just been unlatched. It had been shattered. The drive to Grandma B's apartment was the quietest 30 minutes of my life. The engine hummed, and the streetlights of Maple Street blurred into long golden streaks behind us. I sat in the passenger seat with my faded backpack on my lap, holding that small, wrinkled photo of my mother, the one where we were laughing at the fair, covered in cotton candy. Behind us, Uncle Douglas had stayed at the house, finally finding the courage to tell Arthur he would help move my things. The air didn't smell like rosemary and tension anymore. It smelled like safety. Grandma B's apartment was small, filled with the scent of lavender and old books. That first night, she gave me the bed and took the sofa, refusing to hear a word of protest. "I've slept on worse, honey," she said with a wink. "Your grandfather's snoring was louder than a freight train for 40 years. A sofa is a vacation." But the silence was heavy. Even though I was physically out of that house, Arthur's voice was still a splinter in my mind. "You destroyed this family. You're selfish. You'll have nothing." I lay in the dark, my heart racing, waiting for the floorboards to creak, waiting for him to burst through the door and demand I start the coffee. It takes a long time for the body to realize the war is over. The next morning, the calls started. Arthur's voice on the voicemail shifted from a soft, manipulative plea, "Come home, sweetheart, let's talk like a family," to a cold, razor-sharp threat within hours. But Grandma B just sipped her tea and silenced her phone. She had already filed the formal 30-day notice. She wasn't playing a game, she was finishing a chapter. A few days before orientation, Grandma B sat me down and handed me a cedar box with a brass clasp. "I've been guarding this for 9 years, she whispered. "Your mother wrote this when she knew she wouldn't see you grow up. She told me to give it to you when you were ready to fly." I opened the envelope with trembling hands. My mother's handwriting was round and elegant, the ink slightly smudged in the corners. She didn't write about her illness or my father's anger. She wrote about me. She wrote about the way I used to memorize the stars and the breakfast in bed I made her when I was 7, burnt toast and all. But it was the last line that broke the dam. Stella, don't ever let anyone tell you what you're worth, especially not the people who are supposed to love you. You are the one who makes it out. I cried then, not the silent, invisible tears Arthur had forced on me, but real, ugly, soul-clearing tears. I wasn't just my father's housekeeper. I was my mother's legacy. Numbers don't lie, and by the time I moved into my dorm at Penn State, the math had shifted. Arthur had moved into a cramped one-bedroom above a dry cleaner, finally realizing that the throne he sat on was built with someone else's money. Grandma B rented the Maple Street house to a young family, and every cent of that rent went into a fund for my nursing degree. I stand here today, 3 years later, in a white coat that my father said I'd never earn. I learned that power isn't about who can shout the loudest or who can tear up the most paper. Real power is a woman sitting quietly at the end of a table, holding a property deed and a phone. Real power is walking away from a cage you were told was a home. Leaving isn't giving up, it's choosing to grow. If you're sitting at a table where your dreams are being torn into pieces, I hope you find your bee. Or better yet, I hope you find the Stella inside yourself. Remember, never let anyone, especially those who claim to love you, tear up your dreams to keep you small. If Stella's victory inspired you, please hit that like button and subscribe to From My Heart for more stories of justice. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own future? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.